Hello, all. Thank you so much for joining. We still have a few people coming in, but I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm Eva Clark. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications at HowGood, and I'm so excited to kick off this discussion with HowGood's leadership team. So whether you were among the thousands of people traversing New York at Climate Week last week, in the very unexpected heat, or you weren't able to make it and you're looking for more of a recap, over the next half hour, we'll be taking a look and talking about the biggest trends and signals that arose throughout the week. And will be really important for all of us in the food industry to keep in mind while we're planning really our next year and beyond. So I think that all of us can agree that this year's Climate Week felt different in a few key ways. The urgency of moving beyond pledges into action was really felt everywhere, from UN leadership pushing for alignment between policy and economic transformation, to the much increasing attention on delivering real reduction, especially in the food industry. Everywhere you went, you could really feel the criticality of what we're doing. At HowGood's Regen House, we hosted 57 sessions this year. I think in and of itself, that's a testament to how much the food industry, all of you, are craving that kind of real collaborative conversation. Many of these were aimed at regen ag, scaling climate smart landscape solutions, building partnerships across the value chain. Many of our partners are here with us today. And really, brands, farmers, retailers, funders, everyone seemed to be asking, how do we scale in a credible way? And that was from on the ground farming practices all the way through to large scale corporate reporting. So many standout announcements were made, and we'll be publishing a roundup later this week or early next. But for now, I want to dive into really synthesizing what all of this means for our industry going forward. So we've got here with us today members of HowGood's leadership team who spent time all over the city last week. Everyone here is probably equal parts exhausted and energized. And I've asked them here to have, frankly, a pretty informal conversation about the signals and trends that arose. That'll be most important for our clients, our partners, really everyone across the food industry to be keeping in mind for this coming year. So I'll pose a few questions and then we'll open up to all of you for any others that you have. Feel free to drop those into the chat and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end. So Alexander, Arthur, Nina, and Ethan, to begin, I'll ask each of you, if you had to pick one stat or a data point from the week that stuck with you and symbolizes or signifies some sort of larger shift, what would that be? Alexander, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think you kind of alluded to it, but it was the number of events that we held, but also the number of unique registers for Regen House, right? We had 19,800 unique people register for Regen House. And I think that speaks not only to, the commitment of the people who are throwing these events and the effort and the money that they're willing to put behind that, but also the interest from the wider audience as to how do we do this, especially the events that were driven towards implementation and scale. It was almost overwhelming, which is what we need during this time, right? We need an overwhelming level of interest and engagement to drive forward the level of and the scale of change that we want. So that was like the symbolic piece that I held on to.
Absolutely. Ethan, how about you?
I'm going to use a number which is 72 million, which I'm borrowing from Daniela Vega of Ahold Delhaize. So I'm going to zoom into a particular moment. We had this whole week. There's over 1,000 events at Climate Week. Alexander was telling me before, 100 of them were Regen Ag focused in some way. So with our 57, that means that Regen House was like 60% of the Regen Ag events at Climate Week, which is awesome. And also is the biggest Climate Week ever. We had 4 days. I'm zooming into one session of one day and one moment in that session, which was it was called Regeneration: The Next Horizon, and it was a conversation with the Chief Sustainability Officer of ADM, Kathy Pickus, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Kraft Heinz, Janelle, and Daniela Vega, SVP of Climate at Ahold Delhaize, major global retailer. And I asked people to introduce themselves by the numbers, and her number was 72 million. And that's the number of customers that Ahold Delhaize is serving each year. And so just one person at one event noting that the decisions her company is making is touching 72 million people is so significant. You multiply that out by the number of CEOs, C-suite members that we had at Regen House, and you can just really see the scale of impact that we're having.
Absolutely. Certainly speaks to the scale aspect. Nina, how about you?
Yeah, I was just starting to smile because Alexander stole the version that I had written down to this question. Had to scrap that one, and then Ethan took it one step further in the scale direction. I think the number that I'm thinking about weirdly is 8, which is the number of people that could sit around a table in most of the sessions we hosted at Regen House. And it was cool. We did a session called Future Forum in which we brought together some of our customers and a couple of our key partners. And there were 8 people sitting at one table that like were right on the cusp of actually making like a pretty epic agreement. Like there was like jokes of just like getting a piece of paper so we could all sort of sign an MNDA and just like to get shit done. Sorry for the language, but it was cool. It was like actually there's this huge scale that's growing year on year, right? Like in data, in people, in like effort and acceleration. And also all it takes is 8 people or maybe 2 people, right? Sitting around a table making decisions. So that was interesting for me.
Certainly a time of highly increased collaboration. Maybe we'll send out an MNDA at the end of in the Zoom chat. Arthur, go ahead.
Mine is a little more general. I was at one of the external events and someone said 55% of people under the age of 30 don't think there's anything they could do about climate change. And it was in this long, extended thing about the hopelessness and the difficulty. And like, I was pitching to the board of my college to try divest, which is a word I don't even know if it exists anymore, from carbon initiatives in 2002. 45% of young people think there's something they can do about climate change. 45%, half? That's incredible. Like, just on that scale, like 45% of young people think they can do something about climate change. Like, there was this somber, horrible event, and I was just like gleeful, like this is going to fuel me for months. I just so happy. And I feel like that was the vibe in Regen House, and even for me at Climate Week was there's been this thread and this story of like, well, the regulatory thing's going out, well, but like we're in the food system, we're talking to behemoths that have reputations for doing nothing, and everyone's like, well, head down trying to get the work done. Guess we can't advertise it. We'll just actually spend more time getting the measurement right and knocking it out. And it just, I was really, really proud of our industry to feel a part of that.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to turn the conversation to Alexander and Ethan to talk about sort of big picture, what we saw with tones and signals across the food industry. We'll see if you continue Arthur's optimism or take it any other directions. So just to start us off, what stood out to you most at Climate Week across all events across the city? I know you were at many of them. Was there a moment, a theme, a conversation that felt sort of new or different from the conversations we've been having?
Mute. I mean, I think I have 2 different takes on this. One is really around something that struck me, and that was, Russell, a chestnut farmer, largest chestnut farm on the East Coast, speaking before the Chief Sustainability Officer breakfast, right? And talking about their farm and their passion, but also about learning about farming chestnuts by going to a farm in Italy that is, the trees were planted 500 years ago, and they surround this village right? And the village harvests the chestnuts, right? And they knew the names of the like great 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 grandparents that had planted the trees, right? And has sustained this village for these 500 years. And they brought forward this, you know, they are the culture within agriculture. And that we all are the culture within the agricultural system and environment, but also the culture of the food we eat when we make a meal at home. And this cultural piece struck me on a very emotional level of like, it's even in the words we use, we just don't honor it and hold it always. And so holding that felt really potent. And at the same time, the shift in the culture that I'm seeing right now, you know, the CEO lunches where we sat down and talk about what the struggles and solutions are, is like businesses are fully under threat. Their entire way of operating is shifting now because of the loss of arable farming land, especially in, you know, coffee and cacao, right? They are seeing it. They are hit first at scale in a way where like the biggest players are like, we cannot secure enough of these ingredients. And so that is a very, that's shifting the way, you know, risk is being taught about a lot, but also, you know, that risk will keep showing up unless we have the right climate solution. So you can track risk, but you also need to help prevent it. And so there's this really interesting dynamic that is going to continue to develop over the coming years.
What kind of role do you think risk is going to be playing, Alex?
I think risk is going to drive dollars into what we already know, right? Like we knew, I went to a dinner 3 years ago that were like 15 years from now, here are the crops that will no longer be available to the general public at the current, anywhere near the current prices, unless you're doing something extravagant, right? And so these crops were known. This is already known within our environment, but I think outside of, you know, the sustainability experts that we probably have on this call, the CEOs are now talking about it in their supply chains. 2 years from now, they are going to be planning for it. And part of that planning will be the reduction piece and the prevention piece. And so I think this will elevate the conversation into the rooms that it needs to be in, right? As well as elevate the willingness to commit dollars towards making changes on the ground. And some of these players were already talking about that. I mean, we saw that with Nespresso partnering with Rainforest Alliance and the work that they were doing, right? And there were, you know, some deep challenges on that as to like, hey, won't a certification like this drive up the price of your coffee, which is already, and I think that one of the questions in the room was like, coffee is predicted to hit $20 a cup, right, within 10 years, right? And, you know, one person said, well, this is New York, it's almost $20 a cup already. But for everywhere else, the reality is like that, you know, the question was, how can you justify charging more when it's already going to go up? And my pushback to the question was, if we don't make these changes, it will just be fully unavailable. And if we make these changes, it will go up, but up less, right? But not just in coffee, we have to do it across the board. And so it is a prerogative to try and front load what we're spending now so that we are not just putting on layaway the cost onto future generations.
Absolutely. And when you're thinking about committing dollars, Ethan, from conversations that you had with leaders across the industry, what did you see moving up the priority list right now? What's going to start to get funded with a little bit more urgency?
Yeah, there's 3 points I'd make on kind of overall trends, including that. The first is just scale. Regen Ag and Regen Food Systems are growing at an unprecedented scale. If you didn't catch it last week, we released a report with Kiss the Ground. That's the Regenerative Agriculture Industry Map. We can get a link in the chat. that documents the last decade of growth in regenerative agriculture. And you can guess the shape of it. It's like a pure exponential growth hockey stick, with it showing up in more places, being used by more companies for the first time in our research this year. Farmers, the number of farms actually overtook the number of all other organizations that were using the term regenerative agriculture. So this growth is really significant. And that's because of many reasons, but some of them is major global corporations are setting and starting to hit their regen ag targets. ADM announced they hit their 5 million acres in some form of regen ag early. PepsiCo's moving on their, millions of acres commitment. So there's millions of acres committed, and we are actually seeing motion and scale. Part of the reason is I think there is a greater unity now around the concept of focusing on a place, on going place centric, not a big global program that does everything and is a stamp across, but actual place-centric approaches, landscape level, you hear them being talked about, where we're honing on a particular area, understanding the bioregional uniqueness, the cultural, economic situation in that place, and then tailoring regen ag programs and engagements, listening to the farmers of that place in order to design what's happening, as opposed to just coming in top down and saying, here's what we're going to do. They're listening from the ground up in different places, what that place-centric aspect does, and the fact that there's unity, a little more unity now around the process of doing that, is it unlocks these blended capital financing stacks where we're getting not just corporate investment, but you're also getting international and local banks showing up. We had a higher percentage of investors and banks and insurance companies coming to Regen House this year than ever before, which will continue. You get local governments involved, you get local philanthropies, you get different off-takers, so not just food companies, but also fashion and beauty coming together in a place to build up that stack that can really transition towards regenerative food and agriculture systems here.
Amazing. So speaking of grounds up, I'm going to take it to bottoms up reporting and switch over to Nina and Arthur to talk a little bit more about what we're hearing on the research side and the carbon accounting side. So last week we heard a lot about product level carbon footprints. What are the biggest methodological advances that you two are seeing right now, or biggest shifts in how companies are approaching carbon accounting in general? Nina, I'll start with you.
Great question. I mean, I think what's interesting, thinking about like this year versus last year in terms of the nature of the conversations that folks are having, particularly around product carbon footprints for use in carbon accounting, is that there are enough folks, organizations, companies that have done it, that have seen how useful it is and what it can unlock, that it's no longer the sort of like pie in the sky art of the impossible. It's real, it's here, it's like a thing that is possible, right? And in the same breath, that means that all of a sudden, the number of companies that say that they can do product carbon footprinting has just like exploded, right? Especially with like the rise of AI, and it's amazing to see the kind of proliferation of solutions in that regard. And a little concerning because product carbon footprints are actually really hard and really useful when they're really good, right? And so I think it's interesting to think about what like the importance is of sound methodology, sound research, consistently applied system boundaries, right? Like we need product carbon footprints to power corporate accounting and reduction, measurement, management, all of that stuff. But we also really like we want and we need it to be sound. So that's just something that I'm thinking a lot about coming out of this week.
Absolutely. Arthur, anything that you would add on what you're seeing in terms of methodological advances or consensus building?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing about product carbon footprinting is there's a great methodology in the GHG protocols product standard and in ISO 1467. And if you're following one or both or of those or unifying those, we're good. And so I think the advance for me is that the question before really seemed about like whether or not it was wise to bother with the effort. And now the question seems to be how. And at HowGood, having answered the how, we really like that shift, right? For those of us, for those of the people we're working with that are on board, not having to convince people that it makes sense to calculate all of this bottom up, to just do the work, to just get calculating, not on a project by project basis, just like you have a supply chain, let's map it. Where you have great granular data, that'll come through. Where you don't, we will backfill it for you, but at the product carbon footprint, at the very least, you will get that, right? And that has been really, really good. But also, I think technologically and methodologically, what's getting exciting for me is the clarity below the product carbon footprint level. Like that argument has kind of won, right? Product carbon footprints, bottom-up accounting is the way forward. There are laggards, there are people who don't see how it scales, but it does scale. We've scaled it, other people have scaled it to some extent. Like, it's happening, there will be more and more of this. And the cool thing is the next step below that is, okay, everything that Alex and Ethan were just referencing, how are those things measurable, right? Carbon in the ground is removals. Carbon not released is reductions. Carbon in the ground is resilience in the face of those shocks that people are nervous about, is risk prevention, right? And all of that those are layering in. Some of those people may say, oh, regen ag is spreading, but it's a diluted version. You know what? It is. And cover cropping is awesome. And if you weren't doing cover cropping before and you are now, and that's when you get a 500-year storm that hits your land, you will be better off than if you weren't cover cropping. And so will your crops, and so will your farm for your children, right? And it doesn't prevent you from taking the next step, from doing intercropping, from nailing in the next crops. And we're measuring those, and other people are measuring those, and the commitment to measuring those incrementally, not all at once, not with a stamp of organic or something like that, but layer by layer, and flowing that through bottom-up accounting into your actuals and testing your potential all at once is exciting. And it's very, very cool. And it's just on the verge of being not just a thing that we're telling people is possible, but a thing that people are almost expecting. Like, wait, why can't this go in here? We did this already. Shouldn't this be showing up in our product? So I think the technological advances have all been made, and there is some difficulty in the next stage of knitting all of them together for sure, but methodologies are largely aligned. LSR flag is in place and is going to be announced on time this time, which is looking good. The separation of flag and removals means flag is going to be easy for people who are doing bottom-up accounting to report. It's only hard if you're top down. It's easy if you're bottom up. Again, right? These things, they're coalescing into a normalized, structured, solid, interwoven ecosystem, and it's a good moment to be working in it, even if it's like, still there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting about like everything that you just described, Arthur, is that it's like this moment when we're actually seeing it go from like theory and concept into like it's a technology that like we all get to use, right? And I think for me, it's this moment where I think collectively we're experiencing this like creative spark of like the technology is there, it's stable, it's scalable, and now the rest of us can start to say, what can we use this technology to solve? How else can it be applied in our businesses, right? In the real world, like not just for carbon accounting and scope 3 measurement, right? Like that's like math. And that's like, I'm glad that is feeling like relatively well addressed at this point. But the exciting thing for me is like, okay, what else can we do with this technology and with the data to really drive the things that we're all aiming for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is a very quick conversation, but I'm gonna open up. We're getting a number of questions in the chat that sort of speak to the larger global climate, global environment that we are having these conversations in. And I think worth addressing those as a larger group, because it certainly is impacting us on a daily basis. Ethan, I'm actually gonna pose these questions to you, but Comments on the larger political landscape, differences between the EU and the US, and sort of the regulatory realities that our industry is living in.
So my sense is that companies, by and large, are not backing down. I think they're talking less about what they're doing, but I think they are still doing. Peter Bacher, the CEO of WBCSD, made a comment earlier this year that I have found to be quite true. He said, it's not, people say like, stay the course, stay the course. You don't have to change the course. And he said, actually, no, let's change the course, but keep the destination the same. And so my sense is that people are really doing that. Companies are doing that. They're figuring out, we're talking a lot more about risk and resilience. We're focusing more on ROI, bottom line approaches. And actually sustainability and ESG folks are getting better at honing their arguments so that they're hitting top line, revenue growth targets and bottom line efficiency and profitability. I actually think it will make us stronger in the long term, the pushback that's been happening right now. I also just want to pick up this last question from Thomas Forster. It's a really cool question. Are the parallel efforts of business community, and then the local subnational governments on food systems emissions reduction, are they integrating sufficiently at technical levels in at-scale supply chains? Not yet, but we're getting there. Part of the reason we went to the UN Food Systems Summit in Ethiopia this year was to start to knit some of those together. We're doing a project right now with WWF in their pilots for the Codex Planetarius, which is bringing environmental performance data and this sort of bottom-up accounting for detailed product and ingredient and crop product footprints, but then bringing that to the realm of international trade agreements, tariffs. How do we embed some of that in there? And then we're also getting inbound from cities and municipalities, like the New York City Mayor's Office of Food Policy. We've had some conversations with other places around the world as well, are saying, how do we look at this from a city level, from a municipality level, and can we weave that together with the good work and the investments that the companies are doing? Is it all knit together perfectly yet? No. Are we on it and want to work with you all on it? Yes.
Amazing. And I love that quote, change the course, keep the destination the same. All right, I'm going to hold you all to one sentence each to close us out. And we'll go Alexander, and then Arthur, and then Nina, and then Ethan. What is a signal from this year's Climate Week that you feel will shape the food industry next year? What do we all expect to see? Alexander, you can kick us off.
I think that sustainability is tied directly to resilience, right? And that if we want to keep lower costs and these companies healthy, the way to do that is via sustainability. It's the only option within the food system. And people starting to hold that as like I believe in sustainability outside of ROI, but it also is now so directly tied for these companies that it is being held at that level. And so us driving that home as you should invest in this because it is for the health of your business and the health of the world, right? Instead of and it can also be profitable, is a shift. And honing that and using that to scale this, I think is a really important moment right now.
More so now than ever. Yeah. Arthur.
I think when the whole world of individuals that work in this realm see the power of, and this is stupidly technical, I know, bottom-up PCFs in mass, what you can predict, what you can do, what you can build, what you can modify, that literally something as nerdy and little as this is going to change the world over the next couple of years. That bottom-up PCFs for carbon accounting allow us to see the change and do the change. And I'm just so excited about scaling it, not defending it.
Nina.
We've talked a lot about conditions and pre-existing conditions, technologies and things that need to be in place. The thing that is not a number or a data point that I came out of this week holding is trust. and that like we're all really eager to trust one another. And if we can use that sort of as a layer on top of all of these amazing pre-existing conditions, I think we're going to be in a much different place this time next year.
Nice. Ooh, I saw an exploding heart. I didn't even know you could do
Yeah.
that on Zoom.
Nina got all the hearts there.
Ethan.
I love it. I'm gonna do like a weird. You asked for signal, so I'm gonna do like a weird thing that I just see over the horizon that I think is actually gonna be really important, but it's kind of boring, and it is the insurance industry. I think showed up to Regen House, and I heard a number of conversations that were sort of like, wait, don't we just need to de-risk some of this innovative stuff so we can scale it? And so with the banks showing up and insurance showing up, this is also a little preview for some of how we'll structure Regen House next year. I think we're getting closer to that thing that happened in energy where all of a sudden things shifted and it became cheaper to do renewables, which we're in now, and it's having a big effect. We're going to get there for Regen Ag in the coming time, and I think insurance is a little piece that's going to help push us there. So that's my signal.
Fascinating. Well, we'll talk about it next year on this date and see where that took us. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. We'll be sending out notes this week or next week, along with comments on lots of the incredible announcements that were made at Climate Week across the city this year. And feel free, as always, to keep in touch with any ongoing questions. Thanks all.